formulating its national anti-corruption plan, we look at 20,000 records of cases that have been received by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, and from the total, we found 43% from the cases are focusing on public procurement.
$600 million. That's 10 times what banks typically earn on bond issuances.
It was a total red flag, right? It just didn't make sense. As we got deeper and deeper and deeper into it, the more it didn't make sense.
Prosecutors now allege that
they are made up of people who had criminal records, and they seem to have powerful influence over the government. So the corruption level in Malaysia has reached a very high level that endangers the governments of this country.
For the introduction of this case, I will explain about the problem from the newspaper, which is MACC mental corrupt cartel in procurement. First of all, cartel can be defined as an association of manufacturer or supplier with the aim of keeping and maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition among others. And meanwhile, corrupt activity can be classified as the activities that abuse of power that entrusted to them for personal gain or certain interests. For the information, cartels and corruption are widespread problem, and it has been happening for a long time and will continue to be happen again. This can be attributed from the press that there was a cartel corruption in procurement that involving its officer, when procurement officers in the government department were found to be colluding with the contractors or suppliers, such as leaking inside information about projects to bidding companies, and leading to cartel monopolizing certain projects. Therefore, collusion between procurement, government officer and bidder often take place, such as providing insider information, contractors submit their own proposal, tailoring specification and shortening tender period that make bidder go through the tender approval process easily, using corrupt practices at all levels of the department. Furthermore, this newspaper also mentioned that the power and position of a person is one of the main causes in opening up opportunity and space for a person to commit corruption. In fact, MACC Deputy Commissioner of Investigation Izani Wan Ishak stated that the public sector recorded the highest number of corruption cases with 1,628 investigation papers opened from 2018 to August this year. This occurred when there was a lack of integrity and transparency in carrying out the responsibility as a public officer, and out of that number, those involved in 255 cases were sentenced. Again, MACC Senior Deputy Izani Wan Ishak admitted that he faced these difficulties often of cooperation involving influencers individuals in providing accurate information. Thus, from this summary, it has raised several issues associated with the problem in this news.
For this first issue came up according to claims in the news, procurement officers in government department have been found to be in cahoot with contractors or suppliers. Besides that, they also give inside knowledge about projects to the bidding business, and resulting in cartels that monopolize particular project. This demonstrates that government officials do not work with an attitude of accountability, transparency, and also integrity. Izani Wan Ishak, who is the MACC Senior Deputy Commissioner of Inquiry, claimed that in past cases, procurement department would conspire with contractor or suppliers. Then, in a rising case, we can disclose that a procurement department or government employees misbehave by exchanging and providing information, in other words, conspire with a contractor and supplier. The public will see that our government's decision lack of transparency, accountability, and honesty. This is a potentially hazardous condition. Furthermore, this issue has resulted in an increase in corruption, according to the argument that bidders can simply navigate the tender's approval procedure by employing corrupt tactics at all levels of the department. MACC Senior Deputy Commissioner of Investigation Izaniwan Ishak was mentioned in the newspaper as saying the public sector had the most corruption cases with 1,628 investigation documents filed between 2018 and August of this year. Apart from the problem of corruption, as stated in the newspaper, getting information is also difficult. When asked if there was any interference from any party during the investigation, Izani admit to having difficulty in terms of cooperating with influential individuals in providing accurate and true evidence. All of the facts point to procurement officer in government department or government employees that lack responsibility, transparency and integrity in their job. Tenders, money in and out, and public financing have all been affected by this issue. As a result, it is critical to take action to address this problem.
And the second issue is the conflict of interest during the procurement process. The purchasing process should be done in accordance with the fixed guidelines and not simply because of the instruction by the upper management or influenced by interest. This situation, however, can lead to corruption and non-transparency of the procurement process. In this newspaper, through the win-win pact, bidders can go through the tender approval process easily using corrupt practices at all levels of the department. And yes, from this statement, win-win agreement is less about the process, less about the how of getting there, and more about the destination. And from the news, the corruption, however, occurred because of the win-win negotiation, which allows the bidders to go through the tender approval process easily. Public procurement practitioners have the responsibility to manage the public procurement process within the public procurement legal framework and principles. Their personal preferences and those of their family, friends, and associates should not interfere or influence with the decision they make in the execution of their official duties. It is particularly important to preclude conflict of interest of anyone involved in the evaluation, selection, and contract monitoring processes. So, whenever the procurement practitioners are in a situation of potential, perceived, or actual conflict of interest, they must take the necessary action to disclose it by formally declaring themselves disqualified from participation in a particular procurement process due to possible bias given their personal or financial interest.
For the factor of the issue, firstly, the factor is misuse of power. According to the newspaper, one of the main causes of corruption is a person's authority and position, as well as the chance and space to perpetrate the wrongdoings. This is because the more a country's economic activity is restricted and constrained, the more authority and power officials have in decision-making, which increase the risk of corruption because people are prepared to pay or offer money to avoid the constraints. There is a higher risk of corruption when authorities are subject to regulation and have the ability to make decisions based on discretion. Besides, some corrupt procurement officials are vulnerable to corruption due to power, opportunity, pressure, and rationalization factors. They can facilitate bid suppression efforts, for example, by disqualifying other legitimate bidders during the bidding process and take a cut of the profits as bribes for the conspirators. Next, the other factors which cause the issue to arise is there is no rigid policy regarding to the corruption cases. Lack of accountability, transparency, and integrity in public procurement will cause distrust and lead to the case of corruption. Corruption cases arise as a result of a policy that is not strict enough because the public does not consider corruption to be a major issue. In Malaysia, it takes a long time for a corruption case to be resolved. As mentioned in the newspaper, when a case goes on for too long, it is either dropped or individuals released. This demonstrates that our country's laws are not strict enough in combating corruption. Some of the known corruption cases in Malaysia, such as Sabah Water Department, 1MDB, Port Klang Free Zone, and Immigration Department scandal in 2018, illustrates how corruption and bribery are embedded within Malaysia's political and government institutions. The case will not be repeated if the policy is strict enough.
Next, the third factor is pressure to commit fraud, where real situational condition can cause individual to perceive pressure, whether related to work or personal. One of the pressure is from the occupational pressure. First, occupational pressure is a form of pressure commonly found in work and difficult to avoid. This pressure comes from internal member of the organization or external party who are affiliated with the organization. Internal pressure comes from the superior, while external pressure comes from politician or parliament member who have dominance of power. When pressure comes from internal organization, fraud in public procurement can be engineered by the organization's leader using powerful mechanisms such as obedience. In this situation, procurement official will be faced with a dilemma whether to refuse or follow the leader's instruction that lead to a fraudulent action. If the procurement official does not fulfill the illegal instruction, they will have mutation or dismissal. This corruption in public procurement eventually becomes a normal behavior even for all organization members. It was because an individual is more likely to be corrupt if others are corrupt and vice versa. The more corrupt people there are, the less of the probability that they will be caught, the less of the penalty will incur, and the less of the moral cost or negative stigma that they will feel. The last factor is capability to commit fraud. According to the Wolf and Hermansen in 2004, the capability to commit fraud in the procurement comes from the individual's position or function in the organization, as it gives them the chance to exploit fraud opportunity which no one else has. To support, Mahmoud in 2005 mentioned that fraudulence occurs when individuals have dominant power and there is no adequate system of accountability. In the procurement process, the opportunity to commit fraud is only known by the employee who have the authority, such as position, function, and official access in the procurement activity. It was because this employee can arrange the tender process, determine the vendor who will accept the contract, and determine the number and amount of goods and service needed. In fact, procurement officials can help win a contract of a company that has affiliation with public official or certain politician. This position or function can facilitate a procurement official to commit fraud in order to gain power and wealth. Besides, individuals who have capability must have more intellectual capacity than others. This capability will help them to detect available opportunity as well as be creative in exploiting the weaknesses of the internal control system. Individuals who have more intellectual intelligence will have a good understanding of procurement regulation and make it possible to engage in fraud.
The first implication relating to this case is less competition to obtain procurement due to bias. This implication will cause other contractor or bidder to be affected and neglected, and also not given priority to procure government procurement due to this bias among the procurement officer. It can be seen when the procurement process is not carried out properly and transparently, as the purchasing process needs to be done according to the set guidelines and not simply because of the top management instruction or influenced by the interest. This occurs when it is relevant to the government officer itself who disclose identities and information that related to the government procurement to facilitate the bidding process. For example, officer in the procurement department will conspire with the contractor or supplier by writing tenders specification in a way that benefits certain bidder or contractor and accept the late or suspicious bid and cause bidder to go through the tender approval process easily using corrupt practices at all levels of the department through a win-win pact. It is a violation of the procurement process or illegal conduct in which the offender gains an advantage evades duty and thus causes damage to the organization itself. Furthermore, both public and private organizations often rely on the competitive bidding process to achieve a better value for money in their procurement activity. However, with the existence of the issue of the corruption cartels, the bidding processes in procuring is less competitive and in turn affect many things related to the society and the country itself.
For the next implication is procurement corruption can hamper economic growth. Due to the vast scale of money transaction involved, public procurement is possibly the most vulnerable to fraud and corruption and affect economic growth. Corrupted economies are unable to function effectively because corruption obstructs the free operation of the economy's natural rules. As a result, corruption in a country's political and economic process negatively affect the entire society. Many countries with emerging economies suffer from a high level of corruption that slow overall development. The entire society is affected as a result of the inefficient allocation of resources, the presence of a shadow economy and low quality education and healthcare. As a result, corruption deteriorates all societies and decreases the living standard of the majority of their citizens.
Next is the instability of service delivery. Procurement is a crucial institutional process and measure for the functioning of government regarding service delivery. As such, it is important that such a process is characterized by ethical standards to ensure that service delivery is not compromised or undermined. However, a weak procurement practice can be seen as a challenge for service delivery. Through public procurement, governments undertake public works, build roads, healthcare, education, and public order. Thus, a challenge of corruption is considered a major contributor to poor service delivery with great potential for instability. The existence of corruption is associated with weak procurement practice and has gradually eroded governance structures and caused serious threat to the country's sustainable economic development. In the public sector, the heartbeat of service delivery is the management of procurement of service and materials. Since service delivery is the sole responsibility of the government, internally and externally, for a wide array of public needs, procurement therefore is a crucial institutional process and measure for the functioning of the government. Because of its centrality to public administration, governments across the globe apply rules and regulation to promote the best ethical standards in the procurement process. When the ethical standard and rules become compromised, service delivery would be hampered, while good governance would be in jeopardy as well. Without a doubt, this financial mismanagement could affect the government's ultimate objective of delivering services to the people, so that it can be a signal of weak internal controls and ineffective managerial leadership without the ability to manage public expenditure. And the last implication is it can give the bad impact on procurement performance. With the growing number of companies using suppliers based in low-cost regions and increased financial pressure brought about by the current volatile economic environment, the instance of fraud and corruption in the procurement cycle are increasing. Worldwide organizations, whether big or small, are prone to the risk of corruption in their procurement cycle. Corruption are a widespread problem in procurement all over the world. To a very big extent, the impact of procurement corruption to public procurement performance can be substantiated. This is because it was not in line with the real goal and objective of public procurement, which is the main objective of Malaysian government procurement is to achieve value for money. This also refers to the efficiency of using the available funds for various government procurement activities. So, whenever the corruption and bribery activities are at a high level, it does leave a great adverse effect towards the performance. Thus, corruption poses serious threat to the ability of the organization to achieve its operational objective. They can hamper the implementation of the programs and projects of the government. As stated by Hu et al. 2011, public procurement corruption could threaten legitimacy, and such the policies and procedures should be created to curb any possible corruption activities and enhance transparency, accountability, and integrity. And as has been highlighted in the newspaper, MACC Senior Deputy Commissioner of Investigation emphasized that the public sector recorded the highest number of corruption cases with 1,628 investigation papers opened from 2018 to August this year. As a result, the performance of public and local government procurement performance is not only questioned but also jeopardized.
The first recommendation is to create a corruption court. As mentioned in the newspaper, it is suggested that a corruption court should be established so that such cases should be given attention. With this corruption court, the trial period will not take long because the people are disgusted with what is happening now. People will be afraid to engage in corruption because of the penalties, and they will believe that it is a serious matter that they should not have done if we have a special court to handle the corruption cases. In countries in which current corruption flourishes, leaders control the media and do not permit their own criminal activity to be exposed. There are no fair elections that would allow the replacement of corrupt leaders, in part because their political campaigns are frequently financed by the interests that bribe them. It is because those leaders will control the prosecutors and judges, and they are able to operate with impunity. Therefore, a corruption court is needed for the prosecution and punishment of corrupt leaders of the country that are willing or unable to enforce their own laws against powerful offenders.
Another recommendation is harnessing social media. The use of social media is a central part of some of this transparency and more recent anti-corruption initiative. The social media services has transformed the way people interact with each other and the way in which government can promote transparency and reduce corruption. The existing and new cultures of the openness are capable of harnessing social media and the internet application. The modern means have promoted transparency and reduced corruption by empowering citizens to collectively monitor the activities of their governments. The social media are used as tools for anti-corruption by creating cultural attitudes. These tools have created new avenues for openness. The social media have enabled the users to easily access the content and interact with each other via highly accessibly web-based technologies. These media can be used as an enabling tools and technology and to the content generated by them. It should be noted that there are three types of tools such as social network sites, microblogging services, and multimedia sharing services. The social network sites like Facebook, microblogging services like Twitter, and multimedia sharing services like YouTube are widely used. In terms of anti-corruption, the social media have four main potential strengths, which are participation, collaboration, empowerment, and time. Lastly, as a conclusion, corruption in procurement occurs when there is clear misuse of public office. They also can impede economic development, distort market mechanism, and create inefficiency, reducing competitiveness, trade, and foreign direct investment. Corruption can occur through violation of procurement rules or through legitimate deviation from the rules. This study shows that while the public procurement system may be available in the Malaysian government system of administration, weaknesses in the public procurement processes may open avenues for corruption to take place.
Corruption stemming from a procurement system with an aspect of check and balance will cause a major drain on the national budget and can result in a huge loss of public funds. Eventually, the nation's credibility in the eyes of the international business community will be severely tainted, thus reducing the overall competitiveness of the country. That's all from us. Thank you.